Good afternoon. Let's do some business. We are doing it live and doing more at 4 weekday afternoons. We get right down to business with the news-driven hour right after Ben Shapiro and just before the 790 KBC News Blitz with Randy Wang at 5. Mottek On Money, live on the air for you right now, 790 KBC, streaming live online worldwide at kbc.com, and you're on demand. Mottek On Money podcast, kbc.com, Apple, iTunes, and all your favorite podcast platforms. Another winner today, stocks extending the highs today as inflation reports out this morning helped underscore expectations for the Fed to take a modest approach perhaps next week with its first interest rate cut expected in 4 years next week. Now widely expected to be a 0.25% rate cut on the benchmark Fed funds rate, which impacts consumer and business loans. The Dow came in for a closing gain of 235 points. The S&P 500 moved up 42, and the NASDAQ moved up 174 points. Looks like both the S&P 500 and NASDAQ sealed their fourth straight session of gains. Utility stocks in on the rally. In fact, the utilities ETF XLU has hit its highest close seen in 2 years. GM also participating in the rally, up more than 4% after GM signed a memo of understanding with Hyundai of Korea to explore collaboration on vehicle supply chain and clean energy technologies, and a move aimed at cutting costs and bringing new technology to market faster. Big news for GM as well as that South Korean auto manufacturer. On the economy, the number of people in unemployment lines last week rose slightly to 230,000, up by 2,000. Wholesale prices, the latest reading on inflation we got today, showing a mild increase, up again in August, and reinforcing the idea the rate of inflation is returning to low pre-pandemic levels. The moderate increase, according to MarketWatch anyway, in wholesale costs follows a similarly mild rise in consumer prices last month, with inflation slowing and the Fed widely expected to cut interest rates next week. The producer price index, by the way, up 0.2% last month, according to the report we got this morning, pretty much in line with what analysts were expecting. Looks like the increase in wholesale prices over the past year slowed to 1.7% from 2.1% in the previous month and has seen the lowest now in 6 months. Coming up later this hour, we will be taking a closer look at what's happening in commercial real estate, which remains a hot topic. There's a big commercial real estate conference underway organized by The Real Deal in Beverly Hills. We'll be joined with that very latest hot-off-the-press news by Jerry Sullivan, National Managing Editor of The Real Deal, who knows L.A. very well, having served previously as editor of the L.A. Business Journal and Orange County Business Journal. He'll be joining us live later this hour. And on the residential real estate scene, a big surge in sellers, but so far no boost in home buyers, in Orange County at least. California bankruptcies jumping 25% in a year to a 4-year high. What about the latest jobs and inflation here? We'll get the latest on the business scene here in Southern California with Jonathan LANSNER, Orange County Business Register columnist. But first, joining us live now, Fox Business senior correspondent Charlie Gasparino, New York Post columnist. He also has his On the Money weekly newsletter by Charlie Gasparino from the New York Post, and he's author of the best-selling hot book right now, Go Woke, Go Broke. In it, he takes a look at how corporations, such as Target and Anheuser-Busch, took a big hit when they, went left, and that was a big story, of course, and still is. Charlie Gasparino, thank you very much for taking the call here this afternoon.
You know, I love it when you say bestseller, but let's be real clear. In the very narrow field of Amazon political philosophy, it's number one.
Number one. You are number one with us.
Philosophy. And it's number one in my family, too. It's a bestseller in my family.
And with us here, too, Charlie. Fantastic. Congratulations on that. And you've written other books that have been New York Times bestsellers. I know that. So congratulations on this big success. And obviously, people paying attention to this book, obviously. And why don't we start with that and tell us the kind of reaction that you're getting and the message in the book.
Well, I don't want to jinx myself, but, the book's been out for more than a month. And no one's complained that I got anything that I misquoted him or I printed a massive factual error in it. Everybody has been, there are people that aren't happy, but it's because I went through this in a pretty sort of, I went through each and every line of that book to make sure it was journalistic. I mean, here's the thing. I did not want to write a polemic. I wanted to write a narrative, a journalistic narrative that lays out what I think is something really horrible that's going on. It's how corporate America, which was at least nominally neutral, maybe capitalistic, being a capitalist entity, has turned far left. and in ways that I believe is not good culturally for America. And and I dramatize it. By the way, this is not a textbook. You should know, Frank. This is a narrative. I mean, I tell stories. I'm telling a story here, and I tried to be, I tried to make it lively, interesting. If you want a narrative, if you want a business, textbook, this is not it. This is a story. And I think, I tried to be journalistic. Everybody gets a chance to comment and to push me, off my thesis. No one really did, despite the fact that most people engaged, Disney engaged, they didn't, I had good material to work with, I must admit. Disney's a great example because, you're out there in California. This company, which was the Walt Disney Company, right? The legendary Walt Disney, which, was known to be a cultural sort of touchstone for children, for Americana, in its films, in its theme park experiences. Who didn't grow up watching The Wonderful World of Disney, right? And is now literally an arm of the progressive movement. They have a CEO now, Bob Iger. In between, it was Bob Chapek for a couple of years, and there was Bob Iger before that. These are CEOs that imbued so much leftism in the company, which they would take political stands that were, that were progressive on various issues affecting, like the Florida voting, the Florida sex education law, which the people of Florida wanted a law. They put in office Ron DeSantis for certain reasons because he's culturally conservative. They wanted a law, a very popular law, to stop, schools from teaching sex ed to toddlers. So we're not talking about never mentioning the word gay. Yet the left went out there, said it was a don't say gay law, and Disney chimed in with that. And I talk about how that when they did that, how that roiled the company, cost Bob Chapek his job, destroyed the stock price. So that's part of the I would say the last quarter of the book is that there is a revolt going on among average Americans who are tired of this stuff and are boycotting products that go woke. And whether it's Budweiser, as you mentioned, whether it's Disney, going on right now. We should point out that Disney stock hasn't moved since, I believe, 2018. That's a long time.
We are on the air live with Fox senior business correspondent Charlie Gasparino. His new book is Go Woke, Go Broke. Thanks for laying that out, Charlie. And, of course, you cover this minute by minute as we do here. You, of course, have pretty much followed all the news that I just rattled off here a moment ago. And certainly this book certainly is very instructional as we approach the presidential contest here, with one side embracing the woke agenda and the other side going in the opposite direction. Give us your thoughts about what just happened with the debate and where things go from here.
Well, if you're going to, grade the debate on Oxford, what do they call it? The Oxford debating scale, I think, as I once heard, I guess, Trump didn't do very well. I think the biggest problem that Trump displayed in the debate is that it was a lost opportunity maybe to put the race away. He had momentum. Kamala Harris's momentum stalled at that point. She didn't get a convention bounce. And then, by letting her get under his skin in certain aspects, he made her look somewhat presidential, even though she really never answered a question of any substance. That's one way of looking at it. I'm just wondering if it matters that much. The Trump people are telling me that internally they don't, they haven't seen any movement, any bounce the other way. This is still a dead even race. They think they'll pull ahead once they continue to make the case and their case is going to be that Kamala Harris is an empty suit on policy, and what policy positions she has articulated are very far left. So, anyway, that's where I think that's what they're saying. I kind of agree with that. I just think we make too much out of debates. You know, I don't remember a debate ever having an impact except for the Biden one, and he legitimately, just
Melted
I mean
down.
that was a colossal blow. I mean,
Yep.
Ronald Reagan had a horrible debate against Mondale back in '84, and he survived it. He came back. He had one nice quip in the follow-up debate, and everybody forgot about it. I just don't know if they move the needle that much anymore. But time will tell. I mean, it's really sort of fascinating the sort of media reaction to the debate. That all of a sudden Kamala Harris is Winston Churchill here, and because she managed to elide answering questions by two hosts that were like throwing underhand pitches to her and
Yep.
fastballs to the head to him. You know what I'm saying?
Right. So you were at that big speech that he gave in New York recently, right, where business people were nodding in approval. Tell us about that. And that was certainly big news when he gave that big speech at the Economic Club there in New York.
Yeah, I mean, I thought he did a good job at that. Listen, I'm not a MAGA guy, just so you know. I mean, I've been very critical of him. He came out with a tweet or a Truth Social thing because I criticized him on Fox News about his spending. Donald Trump is not known as a budget hawk, far from it, right? He called me never Trumper Charlie Gasparino. So, just put it in context. That said, I thought he did a very good job at that speech. I think he laid out a vision in detail. He took apart Kamala Harris's, plans, such as we know them. They're, articulated through aides or what she has, sort of blandly stated as her own. And I was expecting him to do much of that in the debate, which he didn't do. And I think that's why I'm somewhat disappointed. But, listen, if you know Donald Trump, I've known him for years. Trust me, I've covered the guy back in the 1990s. He's a dude that, they briefed him for this debate. I know this for a fact. He talked to a lot of people who told him, how to answer certain questions. Tulsi Gabbard was briefing him. They all briefed him. He did not follow the briefing notes, so to speak. He just winged it because that's just the way he is. It's somewhat refreshing, right? On one hand, we got a politician that eschews politics. But on the other hand, he had a shot at putting this away, and he blew it. Although, again, it might not matter. I mean, I'm just a simple country business reporter. I just cover this like baseball.
Charlie, let me ask you this. Certainly, among the movers and shakers you were with there at that big gathering over the top business people. What about on tax policy, for example? Obviously, there's pretty stark. Seems contrast as far as economic policy here on the table, as best we know on the other side. So,
one of the problems with the. Well, he laid that out. I mean, her plan, $5 trillion in tax increases, particularly corporate taxes, which by the way, when you raise corporate taxes, when you raise corporate taxes, that gets passed on to workers and to consumers. I mean, that. He did a good job at that, but we heard none of that during the during the debate. None, zero.
Joe, let me ask you this. You've been breaking some news on your new newsletter On the Money regarding the banking giants here in the U.S. Tell us more about the breaking news you had this afternoon with some of the top banking people.
Jamie Dimon is open to working for Kamala Harris, not Trump, if she's elected. And Brian Moynihan is under pressure he's the head of Bank of America. Jamie Dimon, the aforementioned king of all bankers, the head of J.P. Morgan Chase. But Brian Moynihan's under pressure to announce a succession plan. So, sign up for my newsletter. Go to the top of the New York Post, and you'll get all this stuff.
Terrific, Charlie. I know you got to run. It sounds like you're about to hand the valet your keys there. I know you have a big dinner there tonight. So thank you very much for taking the call this afternoon, and look forward to talking to you again very soon. Congratulations on your new book, Go Woke, Go Broke, and we'll be watching for you on Fox Business too. Thank you very much for joining us live.
Heading to Rayo's there, Frank.
All right. Have a great dinner. I'll be there in spirit with you. And that is Charlie Gasparino, of course, a well-known Fox Business columnist and correspondent, columnist at the New York Post, author of the best-selling book that's hot right now, Go Woke, Go Broke. And, yes, he also has that newsletter as well, On the Money with Charlie Gasparino. And let's get out to the freeways now here in 790 KBC. Mottek On Money continues here in 790 KBC. Good afternoon. Another winning day for stocks. The Dow 235 points, settling at 41,097. The S&P 500 at 42 at 5,596. And the NASDAQ at 174, 17,570. The yield in the 10-year note now 3.68%. That's one that impacts the fixed-rate mortgage rates, which have come down rather dramatically recently. We'll talk more about that with Jonathan Lansner from the Orange County Register, the top business correspondent there. We'll also get an update on commercial real estate coming up shortly with our Jerry Sullivan, who's national editor of the Real Deal. They're having a big commercial real estate conference in Beverly Hills at the Beverly Wilshire this week. We'll get an update on all things commercial real estate as well. Turning to cryptos now, Bitcoin down about 300. It's seen an impressive rebound lately at 58,078 here at the moment. Ethereum up 4 at 2,355. Doge at 10 cents. Former President Trump planning to launch his son's crypto business on Monday. Former president planning to deliver remarks about cryptocurrency and the launch of the company World Liberty Financial, a crypto platform controlled by the Republican nominee's sons Donald Jr. and Eric, according to MarketWatch. After the closing bell, the earnings parade continues here with shares of RH, formerly known as Restoration Hardware, up about 18% in extended hours after that retail chain said it continued to see healthy demand for its furniture and home furnishings. The demand for products up 7% in the second quarter, according to RH in its earnings news. General Motors, as mentioned earlier, also a winner today on a tie-up with Hyundai of South Korea. On inflation today, we did get the latest on inflation at the wholesale level, showing a mild increase in the month of August and reinforcing the idea that the rate of inflation is returning to pre-pandemic levels. The moderate increase in wholesale costs following a similarly mild rise in the consumer price index, which came out yesterday. And with inflation slowing, the Fed is widely expected to cut interest rates next week by at least a quarter percentage point. Price of gold in all this, meanwhile, hitting a record high, more than $6 today at $2,587.20 an ounce. Looks like the dollar is expected to come under pressure if the Fed cuts rates as expected next week. And the silver now back above $30 an ounce, up 16 cents at $30.37 an ounce. Taking a look at the VIX index, the volatility index, the Wall Street Fear Index, pulling back today by 3.5%. Crude oil futures moving higher today, right now at $69.30 a barrel, up 33 cents here after hours. Looks like the oil business impacted by the effect of that hurricane that went through the Gulf of Mexico recently and impacted Louisiana. Warner Brothers Discovery Series A shares moving higher today by 72 cents at $7.66, up 10% on a percentage basis. That's getting attention among the S&P 500 movers. Kroger, the parent company of Ralph's here in Southern California, also having a good day, up nearly $4 at 55 and change, a gain of 7%. And also in the movers list, up 6%, Axon Enterprise, AXON, moving higher today by nearly $23 at $384 and change, a gain of 6%. Looks like Moderna, which of course made big news during the pandemic days with their vaccine, pulling back today in a big way. Let's bring up the closing quote on Moderna, down nearly $10, back to 69 and change, a drop of 12%. California bankruptcies, meanwhile, up 25% in a year to four-year high. What about the latest on jobs and inflation here? We've been getting new numbers. Let's drill down on all of this now with the giant on the Southern California business scene. Jonathan Lansner's with us, Orange County Business Register business columnist. Longtime columnist, I might add. Jonathan Lansner, thank you very much for taking the call this afternoon.
My pleasure. And if my call sounds a little noisy, I am relatively close to the airport fire, and some of the helicopters are literally flying right over my home to go get a drink of water in the nearby reservoir. So it's exciting times in my neighborhood. So,
Jonathan, what is the latest on the situation there? What's happening there, first of all, since you're right there on the front line?
Things today are much saner than they were 2 or 3 days ago when the fire first broke out, but there's certainly, fire still to be fought, and more than a few homes, I'd say about 24 cabins that are in this immediate area on the Orange County side of this fire have been destroyed. And, the fire went up the saddlebacks on the Orange County side and then ran down the other side into Riverside. There they've had some damage too off the Ortega Highway in a neighborhood known as El Carrizo. There have been some homes lost, and there may be some damage at the bottom of the hill near Lake Elsinore on Grand Avenue. But like a lot of these ever-changing situations, we'll find out when they stop fighting the fires about what the real damage was. But it's certainly a sad week in this part of the Southern California area.
Heart breaks, and certainly hope for the best with your place and the others there. Is the fire under control now there?
Relatively speaking, but they're going to have to work real hard to put it out because it's huge. And, we've had 2 rainy years and there's a lot of stuff to burn. And that's what's been happening this week, not just here in Orange County and Riverside County, but up in the San Bernardino Mountains and also behind LA up near Wrightwood. So it reminds us all the time that, when we laugh when it's raining, we're happy and everything turns green, but that stuff turns brown and becomes fuel for these fires. So it's, part of life in Southern California. Right, that and suddenly the ground starts shaking. We were awakened by that earthquake this morning, too. I don't know if you felt it there in Orange County, but that shaker epicenter in Malibu today got us going here. So natural disasters, certainly, we're no strangers to all of this here. No, and it's part of the economic equation. Yep. We know about the insurance challenges that many of us face. Those who live close to it face bigger challenges than those who live in sort of the flatlands of this area. But home insurance is certainly an issue to be challenged. And it's not just a California problem. As we know, our friends in both Texas and Florida and many other states are facing the same problems that we've been blessed by low insurance rates for too long, and insurance companies are saying, hey, damages are too high, pay up, and that will be a grand challenge, both economically and specifically in housing, because there are a lot of people who had nice fixed rate mortgages and thought their housing costs were fixed, and all of a sudden now the giant insurance bills are showing up, and repair bills are rising, and the cost of appliances are up. So home ownership, quote, isn't very fixed, even if either A, you have a fixed rate mortgage, or B, been blessed enough to pay off the mortgage. And I think it will be interesting the next couple of years to see how much those costs impact how willing people are to either buy new homes or become first-time home buyers, because relatively speaking, rents look pretty attractive these days. And even though they're high, and that's one reason we're seeing the trading volumes of homes at lows that haven't been seen in 30 and 40 years. And it's interesting, inventory, depending on where you live in Southern California, probably 20, 30, 40% higher than a year ago. Mortgage rates are down about a point. You'd think all the buyers be out there clamoring for homes. And the little that we've heard at this point is the pending sales numbers, for example, which are the contracts that have been signed and not yet closed, they're kind of weak. And that's not what you might have expected if I had told you 6 months ago that inventories would go up and mortgage rates would be in the low sixes. And that raises some questions about economic confidence, and perhaps people are a little bit nervous about elections. One economic indicator is the statewide consumer confidence index from the Conference Board. It's at a 4-year low. People a little nervous these days, and all it takes is everyone buying one less thing, and all of a sudden we have an economic slowdown. If they buy 3 less things or don't eat out once a week, that's how recessions get started. I'm not saying that one is, forecast, but nerves are sometimes nerves, and nerves are sometimes real economic forces, depending on how nervous you are. On the air live with Jonathan Lansner, Orange County Register business columnist. And Jonathan, certainly the job picture is probably the number one thing that impacts real estate. And how is the job picture holding up there in Orange County with affordability? Of course, now the big issue with prices still at or near record highs there. Yeah, I think the job picture is one of those mixed things. I think the thing that people often gravitate to is the rising unemployment rate both nationally in California. At the flip side, we still have job growth, perhaps less job growth than we had, a year or so or 2 years ago. But people are, I think bosses are being very picky about hiring and selectively who they let go or don't hire. So that is yet another reason we're seeing this skittishness, this nervousness. I think the big event, which is pretty well scripted, is next week's Federal Reserve meeting, and they'll probably lower rates. I guess the big question is, will they lower the rates that they control by a quarter or a half? I hope many of your listeners realize that when they do that, nothing may happen because this has been well scripted, and traders have sort of, the big bet, I think, with traders is not whether or not they're going to act. It's like, how sharply will they act? And then we get into the whole parsing of what words did they say? So it certainly will be interesting to think that, what modifier does Chairman Powell use when he talks about the economy or, the job market? We're going to get into reading what adjectives certainly mean and stuff like that. But that's what happens, when the Fed is cutting rates. It's usually not good news economically, if you're a borrower or tied to a business that needs cheaper financing, it's good news. But so I hope, we're all aware that there are people who are nervous about this economy and, not just in Southern California, across the nation, across the globe, no less. And, it will be interesting to see as if we can truly pull off what we have hoped for and seem to be headed for, which is that proverbial soft landing without a recession.
You mentioned the word nervous, and certainly the markets have been nervous as we got that jobs report last month, and again recently, new recession concerns certainly, and the Fed now finally talking about easing the interest rates. In the meantime, California bankruptcies have jumped 25% in the past year to a 4-year high. So a lot of Californians feeling the pain right now.
Yeah, one of the things, to be fair, I think bill paying in California, which I always boggles my mind. I mean, Californians are much better than bill paying than the nation in most states. I think it speaks to the immense amount of wealth that is here, both in good times and bad times. When we got down to about a year and a half ago, where the economy was just searing hot, basically everyone could pay their bills. And now we're at a point where, those who either are bad at paying bills or their luck ran out financially are doing things like, one, filing for bankruptcy. Two, we've seen an uptick in foreclosures, another sign of financial distress. But the caveat to those upticks, before you get even more nervous, is the fact that the levels of these activities are still well below 2018, 2019, 4 years ago, before the Great Recession, and what I presume is a bar for what the good old days felt like. So we are on various measures of economic strength, still above 2018-19, and some of these measures of financial troubles are below 2018-2019. But certainly one cannot ignore certain warning signs, like people are nervous, they're filing for bankruptcy, they may have foreclosure problems on a small but growing number. And when you read the tea leaves more than once a year, and you probably shouldn't do it once a day, but those are the type of things that give you at least an aha and keep people like me and you employed, because people want to know, what do those things mean?
Somebody's got to do it, right? Somebody's got to cover it on a day-to-day basis, and you do a terrific job there, Jonathan. Thank you very much for sharing the very latest with us here. We'll look forward to your next columns, of course, and to follow your work very, very closely. Jonathan LANSNER, Orange County Register business columnist. Thank you very much for taking the call this afternoon.
My pleasure.
About 1,000 real estate professionals have gathered in Beverly Hills today for the LA Real Estate Forum, organized by The Real Deal. That's the authoritative commercial real estate news source online, The Real Deal SoCal. And they're all gathered at the Beverly Wilshire today for a big day of discussions on commercial real estate issues. And joining us live now is Jerry Sullivan, National Managing Editor of The Real Deal, who knows L.A. very well, having served previously as editor of the L.A. Business Journal and Orange County Business Journal. Jerry Sullivan, thank you very much for joining us live from the conference this afternoon.
Thank you, Frank, and it's a pleasure to be with you.
Wonderful. You got a lot of news there today. You got some of the top people in the real estate world there. I see Spencer Raskoff spoke today, and we have Larry Green from USC there and others. Take it from the top and tell us what we need to know about what's happening there.
Yeah, a lot of interesting conversations and insights today. Here's a term I heard today, Frank, that I found very interesting. It came from Todd Tedlaska. He's a executive vice president of CBRE, and he talked about some prospective tenants being office curious these days in LA. So, you're starting to get some interest, I guess, brewing, or at least, some signs of optimism about what has been, especially downtown, a very rugged office market. So, that was an interesting term. At the same time, Kevin Shannon was with Newmark, very well-known and highly regarded broker in the area. He said something very interesting. It was that, I believe the way he put it was that 80% of the vacancies downtown could be found in 20% of the buildings. And so I think what you're, between office curious and that statistic, and I think what everyone's kind of driving at is we're finding the bottom, and people are starting to figure a way forward, or, starting to find out where there might be something to build upon. And so it's been an interesting day for a market that's in a very interesting position.
All right. In the meantime, we follow the Real Deal SoCal website very, very closely, and looks like some big news in downtown Los Angeles. What's top of mind here as you take a look at what's happening here in the Los Angeles area, the downtown area, compared to Century City, for example, and any other big news lately?
Yeah, and I don't think you can compare downtown to Century City. Is actually doing quite well right now, and downtown is, decidedly struggling. But, there's something interesting going on with the gas company tower.
Yep.
And I think there's a tail within that. So you have the county of Los Angeles has made a bid to buy the gas company tower, which is in distress, and, would get a very attractive price, a bargain price. I don't recall the specifics, but I think it was less than $200 a square foot. And then would plan to move their Hall of Administration into that building, and then demolish the Hall of Administration and make that a park. So what I find particularly interesting about that is you're essentially subtracting inventory from the market, and I think there's a lot of that needs to go on. And so, you take a big building out, you fill another, or, partially fill the gas company tower. But today, I think we had news that now the gas company itself is going to move out of that tower and up Bunker Hill. And so you start to see the sort of pathways forming, right? They'll move out. Now maybe the county moves in, and then they take the building, the old Hall of Administration out, and there's less space in downtown LA. And I think, downtown LA eventually needs to have less space.
On there live with Jerry Sullivan from The Real Deal. And last year I was at the conference. I remember when Lou Horn, head of CBRE here in Los Angeles, blasted the so-called mansion tax that's been imposed here in Los Angeles, and its impact not only on high-priced residential, but certainly has impacted commercial real estate in an even bigger way. And there's still a lot of talk about the mansion tax fallout here. What about this ongoing issue and its impact here on the real estate market?
And it is ongoing, and it did come up today. And I believe it was Todd Tedlaska that mentioned that, major lenders have pretty much X'd Los Angeles off their list for lending on things like multifamily and everything else. We've seen a lot of coverage about it. The city is not going to raise nearly as much money as it projected it would, and that's true. Also saying that this was billed as money to raise a tax to raise money to build housing for the homeless, and every spending plan we see, it's very difficult to find any of the money actually going to developing housing. So, that's troublesome. But, I think for the purposes of our discussion and really the long term is the effect on investment in new product and the effect on the pipeline of apartment multifamily development in the city of Los Angeles, I think is going to wind up being devastating as it plays out, because when that pipeline slows, you're really projecting your problems forward. And, we've yet to see the full yield of the problem here.
Jerry, thank you very much for that comprehensive update on commercial real estate coming off the LA Real Estate Forum put together by The Real Deal, the authoritative news source for commercial real estate. Jerry Sullivan, National Managing Editor of The Real Deal, who previously served as editor of the LA Business Journal and OC Business Journal. Jerry, it's always great to have you with us here. Thank you very much for that important update this afternoon.
Thank you, Frank, and we'll talk again soon.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. And stay tuned now for the 790 KBC News Blitz with Randy Wang. And stay tuned again tomorrow at 4. We do more at 4 right here on Mottek On Money, 790 KBC.
Every week, Michael Rosenbaum is getting deep with someone new on the Inside of You podcast.
Lou Graham, A Foreigner. Want to know what love is. Feels like the first time. What is the hardest song to sing?
I've been waiting for a girl like you.
Yeah. I try to karaoke that song because it seems, waiting for a girl like you.
The verses are nice and
easy. But when you say waiting, that's it. I'm done with karaoke. Yeah, I guess.
Inside of You with Michael Rosenbaum, wherever you listen.